The curved chamber of the High Council gleamed under the soft blue lights. 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle, each occupied by a different species from across the galaxy. Some had scales, others tentacles, a few had multiple eyes or breathing apparatus, but all shared the same concerned expression. Elder Tai rose slowly from his seat, his ancient scaled body moving with deliberate care. The light caught on his iridescent skin, sending rainbow patterns across the polished floor. At 300 years old, he was the oldest member of the Galactic Coalition's leadership. "The deep space sensors have detected another anomaly," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. "The third this cycle, each one stronger than the last." Counselor Rin, with her 4 arms and crystalline exoskeleton, tapped a command into her console. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a pulsing energy signature. "The pattern matches descriptions from our oldest records," she noted, "from before the Great Joining." Elder Tai nodded gravely. "The ancient texts speak of a species called humans. They were said to possess dangerous adaptability, unmatched problem-solving skills, and an alarming tendency toward both self-destruction and rapid expansion." A murmur ran through the chamber as the counselors exchanged glances. Some looked worried, others skeptical. Scientist Jun, representing the logical collective, made a dismissive gesture with his thin gray hands. "Humans are clearly mythological. There is no solid evidence they ever existed beyond stories meant to frighten younglings." "Indeed," added Military Director Quan, her bone ridges flaring with certainty. "These humans appear in too many contradictory accounts. In some, they are described as peaceful explorers, in others, as ruthless conquerors. Some texts claim they could survive in almost any environment, while others suggest they were physically weak. Such inconsistencies indicate fiction, not historical fact." The chamber fell silent as young researcher Min stood. As the newest and youngest addition to the council, representing the historical archive, she rarely spoke during these sessions. Her smooth blue skin flushed slightly darker as all eyes turned to her. With respect, she began, "I spent the last 3 years analyzing extinction records from before the Coalition formed. I found significant inconsistencies in the data regarding the terminal conflicts period." She touched her console, and the hologram shifted to show ancient star maps and fragmented data. "There's a systematic pattern of redaction around certain events. References to a specific planet in the arm of an unremarkable galaxy appear and disappear across multiple independent records. And the descriptions of this mysterious third planet match details attributed to the human homeworld." Elder Tai tilted his head, interested. "What are you suggesting, Archivist Min?" "I believe humans weren't a myth." Her voice grew stronger with conviction. "I think they existed, and something happened, something significant enough that records were deliberately obscured across multiple civilizations." Scientist Jun clicked his tongue in disapproval. "Conspiracy theories now. Next you'll suggest the Void Walkers are real too." "The anomalies," Min started, but Counselor Rin cut her off. "These energy signatures could be explained by numerous natural phenomena," Rin said. "Neutron star collisions, quantum fluctuations in dead space. We needn't resort to children's tales." Military Director Quan stood, her imposing height causing Min to step back. "If humans ever existed, they died out long ago like countless other species. We have real threats to address without chasing ghosts." One by one, the other counselors voiced their agreement. Elder Ta watched Min's face fall as her theory was systematically dismissed. "The council thanks you for your diligence, Archivist," Elder Ta said kindly, "but we must focus on verifiable concerns. The border disputes in the outer systems require our immediate attention." As the meeting shifted to other matters, Min gathered her data tablets. No one noticed the small alert blinking on her personal device, a notification from an automated search program she created months ago. It had found something in the oldest section of the archives, something that matched the energy signature in the hologram, with 99.7% certainty. A distress beacon, using a communication protocol not seen in 20,000 years, and embedded in the signal was a single repeating word in an ancient language: human. Navigator Hyun's fingers danced across the control panel as alarm chimes filled the bridge of the starlight. The exploration vessel, shaped like a silver arrowhead, drifted through the darkness of unexplored space. Hyun's 4 eyes narrowed at the readings on his screen. He triple-checked the data before speaking. "Captain, I'm detecting an unusual signal," he reported, voice tense. "It's coming from Sector 87, Quadrant 3. That's uncharted space." Captain Do, a tall figure with coppery skin and ridge-like features, moved to stand behind Hyun's station. The rest of the bridge crew continued their duties, but their movements slowed as they listened. "What kind of signal?" Do asked. "Unknown type, Captain. Not matching any patterns in our database." Hyun adjusted several controls. "It's artificial, though. Definitely not natural." The captain considered this information. The starlight was supposed to be mapping uninhabited systems in this region. Finding an artificial signal here, where no known spacefaring species had ever ventured, was unexpected. "Could it be a distress call?" "Possibly," Hyun replied. "The pattern repeats every 42 seconds. That suggests a deliberate broadcast rather than random emissions." Captain Do straightened up. "Change course. Let's investigate." As the starlight altered its trajectory, Science Officer Min joined them. Her delicate features were pulled into a frown of concentration as she studied the data. "The signal is old," she observed. "Very old, based on the degradation pattern. It's been broadcasting for at least 10,000 years. A hush fell over the bridge. 10,000 years was longer than some of their species had been spacefaring. "Could it be left over from the ancient ones?" asked the weapons officer, referring to the mysterious civilization that had supposedly ruled the galaxy before the current era. "The ancient ones used quantum resonance for communications," Min replied. "This is using electromagnetic waves, much more primitive." Hours later, the starlight slowed as it approached the source of the signal. Through the view screen, the crew could see a dark shape against the backdrop of stars. It wasn't until they illuminated it with the ship's external lights that they could make out what it was. "Structure of unknown origin," Hyun reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Approximately 2 kilometers in length. Appears to be a space station of some kind." The structure was unlike anything in the Coalition archives. It had a circular central hub with spokes extending outward to a rotating outer ring. Parts of it were damaged, with sections torn open to reveal dark interiors. It tumbled slowly through space, abandoned and lifeless. "Life signs?" the captain asked. "None detected," Min replied. "No power readings either, except for a small energy source that seems to be powering the beacon." Captain Do made a decision. "Prepare an exploration team. Full containment protocols. Commander Sun will lead." Commander Sun was the Starlight's first officer, respected for her methodical approach and calm demeanor. She assembled a team of 5 specialists, including herself, and they donned their environmental suits before boarding a shuttle. As they approached the derelict station, Sun couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Whatever had built this had done so millennia ago, yet parts of it remained intact despite the harsh conditions of space. "Approaching docking port on the central hub," reported the shuttle pilot. "Structure appears stable enough for entry." The shuttle extended its docking arm, connecting with an ancient airlock. After confirming the seal was secure, Commander Sun led her team inside. The interior was dark and cold. Their suit lights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors and chambers long undisturbed. Dust floated in the zero gravity, undisturbed for thousands of years. "Air composition is nitrogen-oxygen mix," reported environmental specialist Pak. "Similar to many life-supporting planets, but the oxygen is depleted. Whatever breathed here needed something like our standard atmosphere." They moved deeper into the station, documenting everything with their scanners. The architecture was unlike anything in Coalition records. Doorways were oddly shaped, controls positioned at heights that would be uncomfortable for most known species. In what appeared to be a control room, they found the first significant evidence of the station's creators. Symbols were etched into panels and displayed on dead screens. Commander Sun examined them closely, her heart racing. These markings, she whispered, they matched descriptions of mythical human script. She had read about humans in ancient texts during her academic studies. Most scholars considered them fictional, or at best, an extinct species whose accomplishments had been exaggerated in legend. "Are you certain, Commander?" asked Security Officer Gill. "No," Sun admitted, "but the similarity is striking. Look at the linear pattern, the use of both straight and curved lines. It matches the fragmentary examples in the Coalition archives." Technology Specialist Choi was examining what appeared to be a central console. "Commander, I think I can restore minimal power to this section. The station has some kind of backup system that's been in stasis mode." "Proceed, but carefully," Sun ordered. Choi connected their portable power unit to the alien technology. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a series of clicks and hums, lights flickered on around them. Displays illuminated, showing more of the strange symbols. "Amazing," breathed Min. "The system is still functional after all this time." Choi was focused on a particular console. "This appears to be a data storage unit. I'm detecting information that might be retrievable." Using their translation algorithms, the team worked to decipher the alien technology. Hours passed as they carefully pieced together fragments of data. Finally, Choi called the others over. "I've managed to access what I believe is a final log entry. The translation is rough, but..." He activated the display. Hazy holographic figures appeared. Bipedal beings with no scales, ridges, or other features common to Coalition species. They were speaking, and though the translation was imperfect, the team could make out certain phrases. "Last hope. Earth compromised. Hibernation protocol activated. 50,000 selected. Coordinates enclosed." The message repeated once, then the hologram faded. "Did it say Earth?" Sun asked, her voice trembling slightly. "That's the name given to the legendary human homeworld in the ancient texts." The team stared at each other through their helmet visors, the implications sinking in. "Commander," Choi said slowly, "I've extracted coordinates from the data stream. They point to a location in the far reaches of the galaxy, well beyond Coalition space." Sun nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to report this to Captain Do immediately. If humans were real, if they somehow survived whatever catastrophe befell them, then everything we thought we knew about galactic history might be wrong," finished Min. As they prepared to return to the starlight, Sun took one last look around the ancient station. For thousands of years, it had drifted through the void, carrying its message, waiting for someone to find it. And now they had. The elite vessel Dauntless cut through the darkness of uncharted space, its sleek hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. It was the pride of the Coalition fleet, built for speed and stealth, with the most advanced technology available. Captain Han stood on the bridge, her posture rigid as she stared at the view screen showing only empty space ahead. "We're approaching the coordinates," announced Navigator Lee, his six-fingered hands moving quickly over the control panel. "Entering the system in 3 minutes." The coordinates extracted from the ancient station had led them to a remote star system far beyond the borders of known space. The Galactic Council had debated for weeks before authorizing this expedition. In the end, curiosity had won out over caution, but not without strict protocols. "All systems ready," reported First Officer Yoon. "Weapons on standby. Shields at maximum." Captain Han nodded. "Maintain alert status. We don't know what we'll find." The Dauntless slowed as it entered the system, sensors scanning each planet they passed. It was an unremarkable system, a yellow star with gas giants in the outer orbits and rocky planets closer in. Nothing that would draw attention. Third planet shows unusual readings, said Science Officer Park. It should be visible now. The view screen adjusted to show a blue-green world partially hidden behind its moon. It looked ordinary enough. Oceans, land masses, clouds, but the ship's sensors told a different story. Energy signatures detected, Technician Jin announced, concentrated in several locations across the planet's surface. Captain Han leaned forward. Life signs. Jin shook his head. No life signs detected, Captain. But those structures are definitely artificial. The view screen zoomed in to show geometric patterns on one of the continents, too regular to be natural. What appeared to be cities or installations were distributed across the planet's surface, mostly buried or hidden beneath vegetation. The planet has been camouflaged, Park concluded. These energy fields are masking it from basic scans. If we weren't looking specifically at these coordinates, we would have missed it. Captain Han considered this information. Whoever had hidden this planet had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it secret. Establish orbit and continue scanning, she ordered. I want detailed information before we send anyone down. For the next 12 hours, the Dauntless circled the hidden world, mapping its surface and analyzing the strange energy patterns. The crew worked in shifts, compiling data and forming theories. The most puzzling aspect was the complete absence of life signs, despite the obvious artificial structures. Could it be abandoned? Suggested Officer Yoon during the briefing. Possibly, Park replied. But that doesn't explain the active energy fields. Something is still functioning down there. Captain Han made her decision. We'll send a landing party to the largest structure. Minimal team, maximum precautions. The landing team consisted of 6 specialists, led by Security Chief Min. They'd boarded the shuttle in full environmental suits, armed with non-lethal weapons and scientific equipment. Captain Han watched from the bridge as the small craft descended toward the planet's surface. Landing party has touched down, reported Communications Officer Song. Establishing video link now. The view screen showed the team exiting their shuttle onto the surface of the alien world. They had landed in a clearing surrounded by tall, blue-tinted vegetation. The sky above was cloudy, casting a gray light over everything. In the distance, they could see what appeared to be the entrance to a massive structure built into a hillside. Atmosphere is breathable, came Security Chief Min's voice. Gravity slightly higher than standard. Temperature moderate. The team moved cautiously through the clearing toward the structure. As they got closer, they could see that what had appeared to be a simple entrance was actually an elaborate gateway, now partially covered by plant growth. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, symbols that matched those found on the derelict station. Definitely connected to our space station, Min reported. Sane writing system. Technician Jin, who was part of the landing party, scanned the entrance. Energy readings are stronger here. Something inside is still active. The team cleared away some of the vegetation and examined the sealed doorway. There was no obvious way to open it. I'm detecting a pattern in the energy field, Jin said. It might be some kind of recognition system. After several attempts, they discovered that the door responded to a specific frequency. With a low rumble, the ancient gateway began to slide open, revealing a dark corridor leading into the hillside. We're proceeding inside, Min reported. Lighting conditions low. Activating suit lights. The team moved slowly down the corridor, their lights illuminating smooth walls covered with more of the strange symbols. The air was stale but breathable. They passed through several more doorways, each opening automatically as they approach. It's like the system knows we're here, Jin observed. They entered a vast chamber deep within the structure. Their lights couldn't reach the ceiling, giving the impression of standing under an open night sky. The floor was filled with rows of oblong containers, each about the size of a person. Captain, Min's voice had an edge of excitement. We found something. These appear to be some kind of storage units. Thousands of them. Jin scanned the nearest container. There's something inside. Organic material, but in a suspended state. I can't get clear readings. As the team moved deeper into the chamber, examining the containers, they failed to notice the subtle changes in the lighting. The walls began to glow with a faint blue light, and hidden panels slid open. "What's that?" one of the team members asked, pointing to a movement near the entrance. Too late, they realized they had triggered something. Metallic objects emerged from the walls and floor, autonomous security drones, dormant for millennia, but now awakening to protect what they had been programmed to guard. "We've got company," Min shouted as one of the drones fired a pulse of energy that struck the ground near them. "Fall back to the shuttle." The team retreated, dodging energy pulses from the increasingly numerous drones. They ran back through the corridors toward the entrance, the drones in pursuit. Landing party under attack. Captain Han heard over the comm. "Automated defense system activated. We're returning to the shuttle." On the view screen, the bridge crew watched anxiously as their colleagues fled the structure. The team made it outside, still pursued by the floating drones. "Get to the shuttle," Min ordered. "Jin, try to jam their systems." Technician Jin activated a device that sent out electromagnetic pulses, temporarily confusing some of the drones. It bought them enough time to reach the shuttle and take off, though several energy blasts scorched the hull. "We're clear of the surface," Min reported as the shuttle ascended. "No serious injuries. The drones didn't follow us into the air." But even as the shuttle returned to the Dauntless, something extraordinary was happening below. The team's intrusion had triggered more than just the defense system. Across the planet, long-dormant systems began to activate. Power flowed through ancient conduits. Computers ran startup sequences. And deep beneath the surface, in chambers hidden from the landing party, thousands of hibernation pods began humming to life. "Captain," called Science Officer Park from her station on the bridge. "Energy readings from the planet are spiking. Whatever was down there, it's waking up." Captain Han stared at the readouts in disbelief. All across the planet, life signs were appearing where moments before there had been none. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. "After all this time," she whispered, "the myths were true. The legends of humans, the species that had supposedly vanished from the galaxy millennia ago, might not be legends after all." Captain Dai stood at the viewport of the observation deck, hands clasped tightly behind her back as she stared down at the planet below. 3 days had passed since the activation of the hibernation systems. 3 days of tense waiting, of urgent messages sent back to coalition headquarters, of debates about whether to flee or stay. They had stayed, partly out of duty and partly out of curiosity. Whatever emerged from that planet would change galactic history forever. "Captain," called her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface." Day turned sharply. "Put it through." The large view screen flickered to life, showing the face of a creature that made everyone on the bridge pause. It looked almost like some of the coalition species, but different in subtle ways. No scales, no ridges, no extra eyes or limbs. Just smooth skin, 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. A human. "Greetings," the human said in perfect standard language. "I am Kim, selected representative for initial contact. We request permission to send a small delegation to your vessel for peaceful discussion." Captain Dai hesitated only briefly. "Permission granted. We will prepare a docking bay for your shuttle." 2 hours later, Dai stood in the meeting room adjacent to the docking bay, surrounded by her senior officers. The ship's sensors had detected a small craft rising from the planet's surface. It was approaching slowly, broadcasting identification signals continuously. "They're being very careful not to appear threatening," observed Security Chief Min. "As they should be," replied Science Officer Park. "They must realize how shocking their existence is to us." The human shuttle docked with a gentle thud. After the airlock cycled, the door slid open to reveal 5 humans, 3 males and 2 females, judging by their physical differences. They were dressed in simple gray uniforms, unarmed as far as the scanners could detect. Representative Kim stepped forward first. He appeared to be middle-aged by the standards of biological species, with short black hair streaked with gray. His eyes moved quickly, taking in everything about the room and its occupants. "Thank you for allowing this meeting," he said with a slight bow. "We understand this must be unsettling for you." Captain Dai managed to keep her voice steady. "That would be an understatement. Until a few days ago, most people in the galaxy believed humans were mythological creatures." A female human with auburn hair smiled slightly. "And yet here we are." The delegation was escorted to the ship's conference room, where refreshments had been prepared based on atmospheric samples from the planet. The humans sat on one side of the table, the coalition officers on the other. For a moment, nobody spoke, each group studying the other. Finally, Captain Dai broke the silence. "How many of you are there?" "Approximately 50,000 currently awakened," Kim replied. "Another 200,000 still in hibernation, to be revived gradually as our infrastructure expands." "And you've been here for how long?" "By our calendar, 15,000 years," said another human, an older female with dark skin. "Though subjectively, it's been only months for those of us who were part of the original expedition. The hibernation system was designed to keep us in suspended animation until certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" asked Science Officer Park. "The detection of advanced spacefaring vessels that might indicate the galaxy had moved beyond." Kim paused, searching for the right words. "Beyond the conflicts that forced us into hiding." Captain Dai leaned forward. "What conflicts?" "Our historical records contain only fragments about humans, most considered to be exaggerations or myths." The humans exchanged glances, some form of silent communication passing between them. Finally, Kim nodded. "We fled after discovering how many species feared us," he explained. "Your histories painted us as monsters." "Feared you?" Security Chief Min looked skeptical. "No offense intended, but you don't appear particularly threatening." A male human with silver hair chuckled. "It wasn't our physical characteristics that frightened other species. It was our behavior. Humans evolved on a highly competitive, constantly changing planet." The dark-skinned female continued. "This shaped us to be adaptable, innovative, and, unfortunately, sometimes aggressive. When we began exploring space, we encountered other species who found our unpredictability disturbing. Several early encounters ended badly," Kim added. "Misunderstandings led to conflicts. Some species began to see humans as an existential threat, a species that evolved too quickly, that might dominate the galaxy if left unchecked." The room fell silent as the coalition officers processed this information. It aligned disturbingly well with the ancient warnings about humans. "So you went into hiding," Captain Daz said. "Why not just make peace?" "We tried," said Kim, his expression somber. "But fear is a powerful emotion across all sentient species. A coalition began to form against us. Rather than fight a war we might win, but that would devastate countless worlds. We chose to disappear. We left false evidence of our extinction," added the silver-haired human. "Selected representatives of our species were placed in hibernation at hidden facilities across the galaxy, with instructions to awaken when the time was right." Captain Dai studied them carefully. "And you believe that time is now?" "We hope so," Kim replied simply. "The fact that your ship didn't immediately attack our planet is promising." The meeting continued for hours as the humans shared more of their history, and the coalition officers explained the current state of galactic politics. The humans were particularly interested in the Galactic Coalition itself, a peaceful alliance of over 30 species. "This is what we hoped would emerge," Kim said. "A cooperative structure that might be open to peaceful integration." As the meeting concluded, Captain Day escorted the human delegation back to the docking bay. Before boarding their shuttle, Kim turned to her. "We understand this will be challenging for many in your coalition. Myths becoming reality often is. We ask only for a fair hearing." Day nodded. "I will report everything truthfully. What happens next will be up to the Galactic Council. After the human shuttle departed, Day returned to the bridge, her mind racing with implications. She had just met with creatures of legend, beings whose very existence would shake the foundations of galactic society. "Prepare a complete report for Coalition headquarters," she ordered. "Include all sensor data and recordings of our conversations." Within days, the news spread throughout Coalition space. Humans, the mythical species of ancient warnings, had been discovered. They had not been extinct, but hiding, waiting. And now they wanted to rejoin galactic society. The public reaction was immediate and intense. On some worlds, there was curiosity and excitement. On others, there was fear bordering on panic. Religious groups claimed the humans' return fulfilled ancient prophecies. Military factions demanded immediate containment measures. The Coalition Council called an emergency session. Representatives from all 32 member species gathered to debate how to respond to the human revelation. "They're just as dangerous as the legends warned," insisted the Vorn delegate, his spines bristling with agitation. Their own representative admitted they were aggressive and unpredictable. "They chose peace over conflict thousands of years ago," countered the Trill representative. "That speaks to their character." The debate raged for days. Captain Dad was summoned to provide testimony, recounting every detail of the first contact mission. Scientists analyzed the data on human physiology and technology. Historians re-examined ancient texts for any additional information about the mysterious species. Meanwhile, on their hidden planet, the humans continued awakening their people from hibernation. They made no aggressive moves, but their very existence was enough to cause widespread concern throughout the galaxy. Kim watched the Coalition news broadcasts with a mixture of hope and worry. "It's happening just as our ancestors feared," he told his fellow leaders. "Our mere presence is causing instability." "But there's also curiosity," pointed out the silver-haired human. "Not everyone fears us. That's progress." Kim nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but we must prepare for all possibilities. If the Coalition decides we're a threat." He left the sentence unfinished, but everyone understood. After millennia of hiding, humans had returned to the galactic stage. Whether they would be welcomed or feared remained to be seen. The grand chamber of the Galactic Coalition Council hummed with nervous energy. Representatives from all 32 member species filled the tiered seating, their voices creating a constant murmur that echoed off the high ceiling. Emergency lighting cast everything in a soft blue glow, giving the scene an unreal quality that matched the extraordinary circumstances. At the center of the chamber stood the circular speaking platform, currently occupied by Counselor Yun. Her silvery skin reflected the blue light as she addressed the assembled representatives. "We must decide how to respond to these humans," she said, pausing slightly before the word as if it still felt strange in her mouth. "The discovery of a species long thought to be mythological presents us with unprecedented challenges." The chamber quieted as she continued. "For 3 standard cycles, we have debated. We have reviewed the historical records, analyzed the data from the Dauntless mission, and consulted with our respective governments. It is now time to determine our collective response." From his seat in the upper tier, Military Director One watched the proceedings with growing concern. His people, the Sorek, had maintained oral histories about humans that painted them as dangerous expansionists. He had spent his career studying ancient conflict patterns, and everything about this situation raised warning flags. Counselor Yun opened the floor for final statements before the vote. Representatives lined up at the speaking platforms, scattered throughout the chamber. The Brill representative, a small creature with iridescent feathers, spoke first. "The humans have shown no aggression since their discovery. They have been transparent in their communications and limited their activities to their own planet. We support opening formal diplomatic relations." Murmurs of agreement came from several sections of the chamber. One noted which species seemed supportive, mostly younger civilizations with less historical knowledge. Next came the Vorala delegate, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence as he expressed his species' position. We cannot ignore the historical accounts. While fragmentary, they consistently describe humans as unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The Vorala Protectorate advocates for containment until we better understand their capabilities and intentions. The debate continued for hours, with representatives presenting arguments both for and against engagement with the human population. The chamber grew increasingly divided, with clear factions forming on either side of the issue. Finally, it was one's turn to speak. He moved to the central platform, his tall, lean figure commanding attention. As military director, his opinion carried significant weight, especially in matters of potential security threats. "Honorable representatives," he began, his deep voice carrying easily through the chamber. "I have spent my career studying conflicts and threats to galactic stability. The emergence of humans represents potentially the greatest challenge we have faced in generations." He activated the central display, which showed ancient text fragments from various civilizations. These historical accounts, dating back 15 millennia, all contain warnings about human behavior. They describe a species that evolved in a high-competition environment, developing problem-solving abilities and adaptability far beyond what would be considered normal. One changed the display to show the technical data from the Dauntless mission. Their technology, even from thousands of years ago, demonstrates innovation that does not follow expected patterns. Their hibernation system maintained 50,000 individuals in stasis for 15 millennia with minimal degradation, a feat our scientists still cannot fully explain. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many representatives as possible. Historical encounters with humans ended poorly. Multiple accounts describe misunderstandings escalating to conflicts because humans did not react in predictable ways. Their cognitive patterns appear fundamentally different from all known species. The chamber had grown completely silent. One continued, his voice grave. "I do not suggest that humans are inherently malevolent, but they are dangerous. Not necessarily because they wish to be, but because their very nature makes them so. I recommend the establishment of a quarantine zone around their world while we carefully control any interaction with their species." As Juan returned to his seat, the debate erupted again with renewed intensity. Some representatives accused him of fear-mongering, while others praised his caution. The chamber divided even more sharply, with roughly half the coalition favoring peaceful integration and the other half advocating containment or stricter measures. Councillor Ian allowed the discussion to continue until it became clear no new arguments would emerge. Finally, she called for order. "We will now vote on the official coalition response to the human situation," she announced. "The options before us are full diplomatic recognition and integration, limited diplomatic contact with restricted movement, containment with minimal contact, or," she hesitated before adding the final option, "classification as a high-threat species with appropriate countermeasures." The voting process took nearly an hour as representatives consulted one last time with their governments. The tension in the chamber grew as the results were tallied and displayed on the central screen. When the final numbers appeared, a collective murmur spread through the assembly. No option had received a clear majority, but the combined votes for limited contact and containment represented the largest bloc. Councillor Yun studied the results carefully before speaking. Based on the vote, the official position of the Galactic Coalition will be as follows. A containment zone will be established around the human world. Limited diplomatic contact will be permitted through designated channels. A monitoring station will be constructed at the edge of the system to observe human activities. This position will be reviewed after one standard cycle. The compromise satisfied nobody completely, but it prevented the coalition from splitting into hostile factions, something Yun had feared might happen over this issue. As the session concluded, representatives broke into small groups, discussing the implications of the decision. Military Director 1 met with his Security Council in a private chamber adjacent to the main hall. "The containment zone must be properly enforced," he instructed. 3 patrol vessels at all times, rotating shifts. Any attempt by humans to leave their system is to be reported immediately. One of his advisors looked troubled. "Sir, What if they resist the containment? The reports suggest they have advanced technology. One considered this. Their representative, Kim, indicated they wish to avoid conflict. For now, they will likely accept these terms while they rebuild their civilization. Our greater concern should be unauthorized contact from coalition citizens. There will be those who are curious enough to attempt to reach the human world. On the human planet, now officially designated HD 7729, Representative Kim received the coalition's decision with a carefully neutral expression. He sat in the newly constructed meeting hall with the other awakened leaders, all watching the transmission from the Coalition Council. When it concluded, the room remained silent for several moments. Finally, the silver-haired man spoke. Containment. After 15,000 years, we emerged to find ourselves prisoners once again. It could have been worse, Kim replied calmly. They could have voted for elimination. This gives us time to demonstrate that we are not the monsters of their legends. The dark-skinned woman nodded in agreement. We spent millennia in hibernation. We can be patient a little longer. Meanwhile, we have a civilization to rebuild. And rebuild they did. Over the following months, human activity on HD 7729 increased dramatically. More hibernation pods were awakened each week. Buildings rose from the long-abandoned foundations. Fields were planted, manufacturing facilities constructed, and educational systems established. Coalition observers watched all of this with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. The speed with which the humans organized themselves and adapted to their new circumstances was remarkable, and to some concerning. Military Director 1 reviewed the weekly reports with growing unease. The humans were careful never to approach the boundaries of their containment zone, but their technological progress was accelerating faster than predicted. They're developing rapidly, he noted to his advisors. At this rate, they'll have achieved industrial parity, with mid-level coalition worlds within a year. Is that necessarily a problem? Asked one of his juniors. They're still contained. One stared at the data scrolling across his screen. Perhaps not yet. But history teaches us that intelligent species rarely remain content with confinement. Sooner or later, they will want more than a single planet. As if to validate his concerns, that same day Representative Kim made a formal request to the Coalition Council. The humans were seeking permission to establish a research outpost on their system's outer moon. The request sparked another round of heated debates within the Coalition. Was this the first step toward expansion? A reasonable development for a growing civilization, or a test of the Coalition's resolve? While the politicians argued, one quietly increased security around the human containment zone. Something told him that the galaxy's relationship with humans was going to be complicated for a very long time. The emergency alarms blared throughout Coalition Outpost Theta 9, a massive space station orbiting the outer reaches of the Lyra system. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor as personnel rushed to their stations. In the command center, General Sang stared at the tactical display with growing horror. They've breached the outer defense grid, reported his second-in-command. 3 more colony ships destroyed. The tactical display showed a spreading darkness consuming the outer planets of the system. It wasn't just ships or weapons. It was a living swarm of entities that moved as one devastating force. The Void Swarm had returned. For 6 months, the ancient enemy had cut a path of destruction through Coalition space. System after system fell as the massive cloud of dark, chitinous creatures consumed everything in their path. They weren't just destroying. They were devouring, breaking down matter at the molecular level and absorbing it into their collective mass. General Sang's weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the edge of the console so tightly his knuckles turned white. Launch all remaining fighters. Priority is protecting the evacuation transports. The Coalition's most advanced weapons have proven nearly useless against the swarm. Energy weapons were absorbed. Explosives damaged only a tiny fraction of the whole. Kinetic barriers were bypassed as the smaller creatures simply flowed around them like water. As Theta 9 shuddered under the first impacts, Sang opened a direct channel to Coalition headquarters. This is General Sang reporting from Outpost Theta 9. The Lyra system is lost. I repeat, Lyra is lost. The Void Swarm has overwhelmed our defenses and will consume the station within hours. All civilian evacuations are proceeding, but casualties are. He paused, significant. The face of Supreme Commander Rin appeared on the screen, her crystalline features set in a grim expression. Understood, General. Continue evacuation efforts. Reinforcements cannot reach you in time. Supreme Commander, Sang continued, I must report that our conventional tactics have failed completely. The swarm adapts to each new strategy within hours. We need. He hesitated, knowing what he was about to say would be controversial. We need to consider unconventional options. Commander Rin's expression didn't change, but her voice lowered. What are you suggesting, General? The humans, Commander. They think differently than we do. They might see patterns or solutions we're missing. There was a long pause. The mention of humans still caused discomfort among coalition leadership, even after 2 years of cautious coexistence. That would require breaking the containment protocol, Ren finally said. Another explosion rocked the station. Sang steadied himself against the console. With respect, Commander, if the swarm continues at its current rate, there won't be a coalition left to maintain any protocols. 12 hours later, in the secure chambers of the Coalition Security Council, an emergency session was underway. Representatives from the surviving core worlds gathered both in person and via hologram to discuss the crisis. The atmosphere was tense, filled with fear and desperation. Military Director 1, now promoted to Defense Coordinator, presented the latest data. The Void Swarm has consumed 7 systems completely. 3 more are under active attack. Our analysts project that at the current rate of advance, they will reach the core worlds within 60 days. Silence fell over the chamber as the implications sank in. The core worlds were home to trillions of coalition citizens. If they fell, civilization as they knew it would end. We've deployed every weapon in our arsenal, one continued. Antimatter bombs, quantum disruptors, gravity lenses, all with minimal effect. The swarm simply absorbs the damage and grows stronger. Councillor Yun, now serving as Coalition Chancellor, looked around the room. Options, she asked simply. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Scientist Min stood up. Once a junior researcher who had theorized about the existence of humans, she now headed the Coalition's Advanced Threat Analysis Division. There is one option we haven't fully explored, she said carefully. The humans. The room erupted in a mixture of protests and desperate questions. Chancellor Yun raised her hand for silence. Explain, she commanded. Min activated the central display, showing data from the human observation posts. For 2 years, we've watched them rebuild their civilization within the containment zone. Their technological development has been extraordinary, but more importantly, their approach to problems is fundamentally different from ours. She displayed side-by-side comparisons of coalition and human technology. Where we build on established principles, they make intuitive leaps. Where we perfect and refine, they innovate and transform. Their thought processes aren't constrained by our scientific traditions. You're suggesting we ask for their help? Defense Coordinator 1 asked, his tone skeptical. I'm suggesting we need their perspective, Min clarified. The Void Swarm was ancient when our civilizations were young. Our ancestors fought them to a standstill once, but the records of how they did so were lost. Perhaps humans, with their different way of thinking, might see something we've missed. Chancellor Yun considered this. Even if we wanted their help, why would they give it? We've kept them contained for 2 years. Because the swarm will eventually reach their world too, Min replied simply. This is a threat to all life in the galaxy, not just the Coalition. After hours of debate, the Council reached a difficult decision. They would send a diplomatic mission to the human world, requesting their assistance against the Void Swarm. The mission would be led by scientist men, who had the most knowledge of human behavior and psychology. 3 days later, Min's diplomatic vessel approached the edge of the human containment zone. The patrol ships that normally enforced the boundary moved aside, allowing them to proceed directly to HD 7729. As they entered orbit around the human world, Min was struck by how much it had changed. Cities now covered significant portions of the surface. Orbital platforms circled the planet, and small vessels moved between them. In just 2 years, the humans had built an infrastructure that would have taken most species decades. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface," her communications officer reported. The view screen activated to show Representative Kim, looking older but still as composed as when they first met. "Scientist Min," he greeted her. "This is an unexpected visit. The Coalition rarely sends diplomatic missions." "Representative Kim," Min replied, "I come on urgent business. The Coalition requests a meeting with your leadership as soon as possible." Kim's expression revealed nothing, but he nodded. "Of course. You may land at our central spaceport. I'll gather our council." 2 hours later, Min stood before the Human Leadership Council in a circular chamber designed to accommodate both human and non-human visitors. 20 humans sat in a semicircle facing her, their expressions ranging from curious to wary. Kim introduced her formally, then added, "Scientist Min has come to us with an urgent matter that apparently affects both humans and the Coalition." Min stepped forward, activating her data projector. Images of the Void Swarm and its destruction filled the air above them. 300 days ago, our deep space sensors detected an anomaly entering Coalition space, she began. "We soon identified it as the Void Swarm, an ancient enemy thought to be extinct. They are a collective consciousness composed of billions of individual organisms that work in perfect harmony. They consume everything in their path, planets, ships, even energy itself." She showed recordings of Coalition fleets engaging the swarm, their weapons having minimal effect before being overwhelmed. "We have lost 7 star systems already. Billions of lives. Our weapons barely slow them down. Our strategies fail as the swarm adapts almost instantly." Min paused, looking directly at Kim. "Our conventional tactics have failed completely. The Coalition is facing extinction." The humans watched silently, their faces grave. Finally, one of the older members spoke. "While this is certainly concerning, why have you come to us? The containment protocol has made it clear that Coalition problems are not our concern." Min nodded, acknowledging the point. The Void Swarm is not just a Coalition problem. If unchecked, it will eventually consume every world in the galaxy, including yours. We've come because humans think differently. You approach problems from angles we might never consider. We need that perspective now more than ever. Another council member leaned forward. "You've kept us isolated for 2 years, monitored our every move, treated us with suspicion and fear. Now you want our help." Min didn't flinch from the accusation. "Yes, because despite our differences, despite the containment, despite everything, we all face extinction if the swarm cannot be stopped." The council chamber fell silent. Kim studied Min carefully before speaking. "What exactly are you asking of us?" "We're asking for your scientists and strategists to join a Coalition task force," Min replied, "to bring your unique perspective to this fight, to help us see what we might be missing." The human council members exchanged glances, some form of silent communication passing between them. Finally, Kim stood. "We will need to discuss this privately," he said. "Please wait outside." Min bowed slightly and left the chamber. For nearly 2 hours, she waited in an antechamber, watching through the windows as human ships moved through the sky above. They had accomplished so much in such a short time. What might they achieve if unleashed into the wider galaxy? Was the Coalition making a desperate mistake? Finally, the doors reopened and Kim emerged. His expression was solemn but determined. "The Human Leadership Council has reached a decision," he announced. "We will assist the Coalition against the Void Swarm. A team of our best scientists, engineers, and military strategists will accompany you back to Coalition space. Min felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she said simply. Kim held up a hand. "However, we have conditions. The containment protocol must be permanently ended. Humans must be granted free movement throughout Coalition space, like any other species, and we must have access to all data regarding the swarm. No restrictions." Min had expected these terms. In fact, she had been authorized to agree to even more generous conditions if necessary. "Agreed, pending formal approval from the Security Council, which I can assure you will be granted." As she returned to her ship with a team of 30 human specialists, Min couldn't help wondering if this moment would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history, either the beginning of a new era of cooperation, or the first step toward fulfilling the ancient warnings about human unpredictability. Either way, the galaxy was about to change forever. The Coalition Command Center buzzed with frantic activity as officers from a dozen species worked at their stations. In the center of the room stood a large holographic display showing the movement of the Void Swarm across 3 star systems. Military Director 1 watched with tense focus as the dark mass pulsed and shifted, consuming everything in its path. But something had changed. For the first time in months, the swarm wasn't advancing. In some sectors, it was actually retreating. "Status report," 1 demanded, barely believing what he was seeing. A young officer looked up from her console. "The human countermeasures are working, sir. The swarm's collective intelligence is fragmenting exactly as they predicted." 1 nodded silently. When the human scientists had first proposed their strategy 6 weeks ago, he had been skeptical. It had seemed too simple, too unorthodox to work against an enemy that had resisted the Coalition's most advanced weapons. "They don't think like we do," Scientist Min had explained during that first briefing. "The humans identified patterns we missed completely." Now, watching the swarm's coordinated movement break down into chaotic individual actions, 1 had to admit she had been right. The humans had understood the enemy in ways the Coalition's best minds couldn't. In the adjacent laboratory, a team of human and Coalition scientists monitored the effects of their weapon. It wasn't a conventional device at all, but rather a network of specialized transmitters that broadcast a signal mimicking the swarm's own communication frequencies, but with subtle distortions. "It's working better than we expected," said Dr. Jin, a Coalition physicist who had been among the first to embrace the human theories. "The disruption is spreading through the entire collective." Human Scientist Park nodded as she adjusted some controls. "The swarm operates as a hive mind. By introducing conflicting signals, we're essentially giving it contradictory instructions. It can't coordinate its components effectively. Like creating static on a communication channel," added another human. "We're not destroying them. We're confusing them." This was what had made the human approach so revolutionary. While Coalition strategy had focused on developing weapons powerful enough to destroy the swarm directly, the humans had immediately looked for weaknesses in its organizational structure. They had recognized that the swarm's greatest strength, its collective intelligence, could also be its greatest vulnerability. On the front lines, Coalition ships were now advancing into territory previously dominated by the swarm. Captain Sun, commanding the battlecruiser Dauntless, watched with satisfaction as the enemy scattered before them. "Target the larger clusters," she ordered. "The disruption makes them vulnerable, but they can still reform if given enough time." Her tactical officer, a human named G, had developed new targeting algorithms specifically for this phase of the battle. "The key is hitting them while they're confused," he explained. "Break them into small enough groups, and they lose the critical mass needed for collective intelligence." The Dauntless fired precisely calibrated energy pulses into the fragmented swarm. Instead of being absorbed as they would have been previously, the weapons now tore through the disorganized masses. Across 3 fronts, the same scene played out. The once invincible Void Swarm was in retreat, unable to maintain the perfect coordination that had made it so formidable. Back at Coalition headquarters, Chancellor Yun convened an emergency session of the Security Council. Representatives from all member species gathered to hear the latest reports. "The tide has turned," announced Defense Coordinator 1, his voice steady despite his own surprise. "The human strategies have proven decisive against the Void Swarm. We are now projecting complete victory within 40 standard days." Murmurs spread through the chamber as the representatives absorbed this news. For months, they had been preparing for the possible evacuation of the core worlds. Now, suddenly, victory seemed not just possible but likely. "And the humans?" asked Elder Ta, his ancient eyes focused intently on one. "They have fulfilled their part of the agreement completely," one replied. "Their scientists integrated seamlessly with our teams. Their military advisors provided invaluable tactical insights. Without their contribution, we would still be fighting a losing battle." Chancellor Ian nodded slowly. "Then we must honor our agreement. The containment protocol will be permanently lifted. Humans will be granted free movement throughout Coalition space, with all the rights and responsibilities of full membership." Not all representatives looked pleased with this decision, but none voiced opposition. The humans had proven their worth in the most direct way possible, by saving the Coalition from extinction. 3 months later, as the last remnants of the Void Swarm were being contained in isolated pockets, a formal ceremony was held on the Coalition capital world. Representatives from all species, including a large human delegation, gathered in the Grand Hall to celebrate their victory and formalize the new alliance. Elder Ta, one of the oldest living members of the Coalition, and once a vocal skeptic of humans, addressed the assembly. His scaled skin had faded with age, but his voice still carried authority. "Today we welcome humans as full partners in our galactic community," he said, "and I must acknowledge what many of us have been reluctant to admit. The myths contain truth." He gestured toward the human delegation, led by Representative Kim. "Our ancient warnings about humans were not entirely unfounded. They are indeed adaptable, unpredictable, and capable of remarkable innovation. But these qualities, which we once feared, have proven to be precisely what we needed in our darkest hour." Kim stepped forward to stand beside Elder Ta. The contrast between them was striking. The ancient, scaled alien and the smooth-skinned human. Yet they shared the same expression of cautious optimism. "But the myths also contained exaggerations," Elder Ta continued. "Humans were portrayed as inherently aggressive, seeking dominance above all else. In reality, we have found them to be complex, like all sentient species, capable of both great destruction and great compassion." Kim addressed the assembly next. "For 15,000 years, humans hid from the galaxy, believing we were unwelcome. We chose hibernation over conflict, patience over confrontation. Now we return to galactic society not as conquerors or threats, but as partners. Human ingenuity combined with the wisdom of the Coalition has already achieved what neither could accomplish alone." In the audience, Scientist Min listened with a sense of personal vindication. From her early days as a junior researcher theorizing about the existence of humans to now witnessing their integration into the Coalition, she had come full circle. After the ceremony, she found herself in a garden overlooking the capital city, joined unexpectedly by Representative Kim. "I understand you're writing a historical account of recent events," he said. Min nodded. "I'm documenting it all, from the rediscovery of humans to the defeat of the Void Swarm. I want to ensure that future generations know the true story, not just myths and legends." Kim smiled. "Truth is usually more complicated than legend. I hope your account captures that complexity." "I'm trying," Min replied. "It's challenging to convey how quickly things change. 2 years ago, most people thought humans were mythological creatures. 1 year ago, you were contained and isolated. Now, human ships travel freely through Coalition space, and human scientists work alongside ours in research facilities across a dozen worlds. Change can happen quickly when necessity demands it," Kim observed. "The question is whether this new understanding will last beyond the crisis that created it." Over the following year, a new era began. Human colony ships set out to explore regions of space long ignored by the Coalition. Mixed crews of humans and other species embarked on scientific missions. Trade routes were established between human worlds and coalition planets. There were challenges, of course. Cultural misunderstandings led to occasional tensions. Some coalition species remained wary of humans and their unpredictable ways. Some humans found coalition bureaucracy frustratingly slow and methodical. But the shared victory over the Void Swarm provided a foundation of mutual respect that helped bridge these differences. The humans' unique approach to problem-solving complemented the coalition's methodical thoroughness. Their different perspectives strengthened both societies. In her office at the newly established Sena Cultural Institute, scientist Min put the finishing touches on her historical account. She had titled it simply Humans, Myth and Reality. It chronicled everything from the ancient warnings to the defeat of the Void Swarm to the ongoing integration of humans into galactic society. As she reviewed the final chapter, she reflected on how far they had all come. The species that had returned from legend had found their place in the galaxy. The myths had been replaced by a more complex, more interesting reality. Humans were no longer creatures of fearful legend. They were neighbors, colleagues, partners, different, sometimes challenging, but ultimately valuable members of the galactic community. The ancient warnings had contained seeds of truth, but the full story was still being written, day by day, as humans and the coalition built a future together that neither could have imagined alone. And Min had documented it all, finally recording the true history of the species that returned from legend.